for nearly 10 years, driving across the country, delivering goods from city to city. Long nights on empty highways didn't scare me. I had seen all kinds of strange things: drunk drivers, wild animals running across the road, even people standing in the middle of nowhere at night. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night. I had a delivery to make from Kansas to Colorado. The road was familiar, and I knew every truck stop, gas station, and diner along the way. My cargo was nothing special, just a shipment of canned food for a grocery store. The truck was running fine, the weather was clear, and I had a strong cup of coffee to keep me awake. It was a quiet night. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. The only sounds were the hum of my engine and the occasional buzz of a passing insect hitting my windshield. The GPS said I had about 6 more hours to go before my next stop. Then the radio crackled. "Breaker 19, anyone out there?" a voice said. It was another trucker using the CB radio. I picked up the radio. "Yeah, I'm here. Who's this?" "Name's Rick. You on Highway 50, buddy?" "Yeah," I said. "Heading west. You?" "I'm a few miles ahead. Just giving you a heads up, there's something weird going on out here." I frowned. "Weird how?" There was a pause before he answered. "Just be careful. Watch your mirrors. Things ain't right tonight." I wanted to ask more, but the radio went silent. I adjusted in my seat and kept driving. Maybe he saw something strange, or maybe he was just messing with me. Either way, I kept my eyes on the road. An hour later, I saw something move in my side mirror. It was just a shadow at first, something flickering in the red glow of my taillights. I figured it was my imagination, or maybe just the wind shifting the trees. Then I saw it again. Something was behind my truck. I looked closely. There was no car, no headlights, just a dark shape, like a person, running behind my trailer. That didn't make sense. No one could run that fast. I slammed my foot on the brake, and the truck shuddered to a stop. My heart pounded. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the cab, my boots crunching on the gravel beside the highway. I walked to the back of my truck, shining my light. Nothing. Just an empty road stretching behind me. I took a deep breath, telling myself I was just tired. Maybe I needed another coffee. I climbed back into the cab and locked the doors, but as I started the truck again, I felt something cold creep up my spine. I was being watched. I kept driving, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. The road was still empty. I glanced at the radio, wondering if I should try calling Rick again. That's when I saw the hitchhiker. A tall figure stood on the side of the road, dressed in dark clothing. His face was hidden under a hood. He didn't hold out his thumb like most hitchhikers. He just stood there, staring at me as I approached. Something about him made my skin crawl. I didn't stop. As I passed him, I glanced in my side mirror. He was gone. I gripped the wheel, my palms sweating. There was no way he could have disappeared that fast. Then I heard it. Something scratching against the back of my truck. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. My truck was moving at full speed. There was no way someone could be hanging onto it. But the sound continued, a long, slow scraping. I flicked on my interior light and checked the small rear window. Nothing. Then the truck shook, not like a pothole, not like a gust of wind. It was like something heavy had landed on my trailer. I gritted my teeth and pressed the gas pedal. The truck roared forward, speeding down the highway. Whatever was back there, I wasn't stopping to find out. A minute later, the sound stopped. I kept driving, sweat dripping down my face. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe exhaustion was messing with my mind. Then, my headlights flickered. The dashboard lights blinked, and for a moment, everything inside the cab went dark. When the lights came back on, my blood turned to ice. The radio had turned on by itself, playing a voice I didn't recognize. A deep, whispering voice. "You're not alone, trucker." I slammed the radio off, breathing hard. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel. Then my phone buzzed. I picked it up. No number, just a text message. "Let me in." My stomach dropped. I looked at the passenger seat. The door was locked. Then the handle started to turn. I swerved, nearly running off the road. I stepped on the gas, pushing the truck as fast as it could go. The handle stopped moving. But when I looked in my mirror, I saw the hitchhiker. He was sitting on the roof of my trailer, his hood down. His face was pale, his eyes black and empty. He grinned at me, his teeth too sharp, too long. I drove faster, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he was gone. An hour later, I reached a small truck stop. It looked old, abandoned. No lights, no cars, just a single gas pump rusted with age. I had no choice. I needed a break. I pulled in and turned off the engine. The silence felt heavier than before. I got out, stretching my legs, trying to shake the fear. Then I saw it. Another truck was parked at the far end of the lot. The trailer doors were wide open, and inside there were deep claw marks along the walls. The driver's cab was empty, the door hanging open. I took a step closer. That's when I saw the note taped to the windshield. Scrawled in shaky handwriting, it said, "If you see him, it's already too late." A chill ran down my spine. I ran back to my truck, jumped inside, and locked the doors. I turned the key. The engine wouldn't start. Then the whisper came again, right next to my ear. "Let me in." I screamed and slammed my fist against the dashboard. The truck roared to life. I hit the gas, peeling out of the truck stop, my tires screeching. The old gas station disappeared into the night. I didn't stop driving until the sun rose. When I finally pulled into a rest stop, I got out and checked my trailer. The back doors were still locked, but there were deep scratch marks along the side of the truck, and in the dust on my window, someone had written 2 words with their finger: "See you." I never drove that highway again. Even after I finished that haul and got to my destination, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hitchhiker's face, those black, empty eyes and that sharp, unnatural grin. I tried to tell myself it was just exhaustion, that I had imagined it all, but the scratches on my truck were real. The message written in the dust was real. I took a few days off, stayed in a cheap motel, and tried to get some sleep. But every night I woke up gasping for air, my dreams filled with whispers, "Let me in." Then one night I woke up to the sound of scratching. I bolted upright, my heart hammering. It was coming from the motel door. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging against wood. I grabbed my phone and checked the time, 3:13 a.m. I didn't move. The scratching continued. Then the doorknob started to turn. I jumped out of bed and ran to the door, pressing my back against it. My breath came fast and shallow. The turning stopped. For a long moment there was silence. Then from the other side of the door, I heard the whisper, "You can't run forever." I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning I packed my bags and left the motel. I needed to get back on the road, needed to keep moving. But as I sat in my truck, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror, I realized something. I couldn't do this alone. I picked up my CB radio and called out, "Breaker 19, this is Roadrunner. You out there, Rick?" Silence. I tried again, nothing. Just when I was about to give up, the radio crackled. "Roadrunner, you made it out?" It was Rick's voice, but he sounded different, tired. "Yeah," I said, "but something's still wrong. I think it's following me." A long pause. Then Rick sighed. "It don't stop, brother. Once you see it, once it sees you, it never stops." A chill ran through me. "There has to be a way to stop it," I said. Rick hesitated. Then he whispered, "Don't stop. Don't ever stop. Keep driving. And whatever you do, never ever open the door." The radio cut out. I stared at it, my hands shaking. Then in my side mirror, I saw something move. A tall figure, standing in the motel parking lot, watching me. I slammed the truck into gear and got the hell out of there. I didn't take breaks anymore. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas. Every time I slowed down, I felt it getting closer. I saw shadows moving in my mirrors, heard whispers in the static of the radio, got texts from a number with no name. "Let me in." It didn't matter where I went. Every highway, every truck stop, every town, I always felt it just a step behind me. Then, one night, I got a call. My phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing on the screen. I answered. Silence, then breathing. Slow, deep breathing. I almost hung up. But then a voice spoke. Roadrunner. You can't run forever. I knew that voice. It was my own. I don't know how long I can keep going. I don't know if this thing will ever stop chasing me. But I know one thing. I won't let it in. Not tonight. Not ever. So if you ever find yourself driving alone on a dark highway and you see a hitchhiker standing on the side of the road, don't stop, don't look, and whatever you do, don't let him in. Weeks passed, but the fear never left me. I kept driving, moving from one hall to another, but no matter where I went, the whispers followed, the shadows in my mirrors, the texts, the scratching, none of it stopped. I started avoiding highways at night, but that didn't help. I started sleeping in my truck with the doors locked, but that didn't stop the dreams. The thing wanted in. It was waiting, watching. Then, one night, I got a job that sent me right back onto Highway 50. The same road where it all started. I didn't want to take it, but something in my gut told me this was it. The final stretch. If I didn't face it now, I never would. So I took the job. It was a long haul through the desert, and by midnight, I was completely alone. The radio was silent. No other trucks, no cars, just the endless stretch of road ahead. Then, I saw the gas station. It was the same one from before, the abandoned truck stop. Only this time, the lights were on. The gas pumps looked new, the sign above the shop glowing in the night. It was like the place had never been abandoned at all. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. I slowed down but didn't stop. I just stared as I rolled past, my hands gripping the wheel. That's when I saw the truck, the same one I had seen before, the one with the claw marks inside the trailer. Only now it looked brand new, as if it had never been touched, and sitting in the driver's seat was me. My own reflection stared back at me from inside that other truck. I slammed on the gas and tore down the highway, my heart hammering. I checked my mirrors. The gas station was gone. I didn't stop until I saw a rest area up ahead. I pulled in, my tires skidding on the pavement. I needed air, needed to clear my head. I climbed out of the truck, breathing hard, my hands shaking. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, steady, coming from the other side of my trailer. I turned. A man stepped into the dim glow of the rest stop lights. He was wearing my jacket, my hat, my boots. His face was mine, but his eyes were wrong, black and empty, just like the hitchhikers. He grinned at me, his teeth too sharp, too long. "You're tired," he said in my voice. "You should let me take over." I took a step back, shaking my head. "You're not real," I whispered. The thing chuckled. "I'm as real as you are." It took a step closer. "Come on, you can't drive forever." I turned and ran for my truck. I jumped inside and locked the doors, my breath coming in short gasps. When I looked out the window, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I just drove, pushing my truck as fast as it could go. But I knew the truth now. This thing wasn't just following me. It wanted to be me. And I had a choice. I could keep running. Keep looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Or I could face it. I gripped the wheel and made my decision. I wasn't going to run anymore. I pulled off the highway, turned my truck around, and headed straight back to where it all started. Back to Highway 50, back to the gas station, back to him. By the time I reached the spot, the road was completely empty. The gas station was gone again, just an empty lot surrounded by dead grass. But I knew he was here. I climbed out of my truck and stood in the middle of the road. "Come on," I shouted into the darkness. "You want me? Then take me." For a long moment there was nothing, just silence. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, steady. I turned. He was standing there, grinning. "You finally stopped running," he said. I clenched my fists. "What do you want?" He tilted his head. "To be you." I took a deep breath. "Then come and get me." His grin widened, and in a blink, he lunged. I don't remember what happened next. One second I was standing on the road. The next, I was waking up in my truck. The sun was rising. The radio was playing soft static. My phone was dead. And the road ahead was empty. No sign of him. No scratches on my truck. No whispers. For the first time in weeks, the air felt normal. Had it all been in my head? Had I finally beaten it? I checked my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked the same. My face was the same. I was me. Right? I shook off the thought, turned on the engine, and pulled back onto the highway. As I drove, I saw something in the dust on my windshield. A message, scrawled in a finger's touch. See you soon. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, I turned on the wipers and kept driving, because the road never ends, and neither does the nightmare. I don't know if I won that night. Maybe I scared it off. Maybe it's still out there, waiting for the right moment to come back. Or maybe it got what it wanted. I try not to think about it. I keep driving, keep hauling loads from city to city. The road keeps stretching ahead, endless as always. Some nights, I convince myself that everything's normal, that it was just exhaustion, just my mind playing tricks. But then, little things start to happen. I see shadows in my mirrors that shouldn't be there. I hear my own voice whispering through the CB radio, even when I haven't touched the mic. And sometimes, when I glance at my reflection in the windshield, it smiles back at me. Even when I'm not smiling, the road never ends. And deep down I know the truth. I'm not alone. I never was. I had been a trucker for years, driving across states, delivering goods, and spending countless nights alone on dark highways. It was a lonely life, but I loved the road. The endless stretch of asphalt, the hum of my engine, and the occasional coffee at a roadside diner. It was my world. One winter night I had a long haul to make. My delivery was in another state, and I had to drive through the mountains to get there. Snow covered the road, and the wind howled like a hungry beast. I tightened my grip on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The first few hours were quiet, just me, my truck, and the occasional vehicle passing by. But as I entered the mountain roads, the traffic disappeared. It was just me in the darkness. The trees on both sides of the road seemed to lean in, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers. Then I saw it. A hitchhiker stood on the side of the road, his face hidden beneath the hood of his dark coat. Normally, I never picked up strangers, but something about him made me slow down. Maybe it was the snowstorm, or maybe it was the way he stood there, motionless, as if he had been waiting for me. I rolled down my window. Need a ride? The man nodded slowly and climbed into the passenger seat without a word. He smelled strange, like damp earth and something else, something rotten. Where you headed? I asked, trying to break the silence. Just a few miles down, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Something about him made my skin crawl. He kept his hood up, his face turned away. I tried to focus on the road, but I could feel his eyes on me. The air inside the truck grew cold, colder than the storm outside. Then he spoke again. Have you ever seen something you couldn't explain? His question sent a chill down my spine. What do you mean? He turned his head slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his face, pale, too pale. His lips were cracked, his eyes sunken deep into his skull. Sometimes the road isn't as empty as it seems, he whispered. I gripped the wheel tighter, my heart pounding. Look in the mirror, he said. I didn't want to, but I did. The reflection in the side mirror wasn't mine. It wasn't even the man's. It was something else, something with hollow black eyes and a twisted grin staring right at me. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on the icy road, the tires screeching. When I turned to the passenger seat, the man was gone. The door hadn't opened. He had just vanished. My breath came in short gasps. I looked around, but the highway was empty. Snow swirled around my truck, but there were no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. I should have turned back, but I didn't. I had a job to do, and I convinced myself that I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. I kept driving. An hour passed, then another. I had almost convinced myself that it was just my imagination until I saw the hitchhiker again. He stood in the middle of the road ahead, his hood still up, his body still. I hit the brakes, but it was too late. My truck passed right through him. No impact, no resistance, just emptiness. He was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept driving until I reached a small truck stop at the base of the mountain. I pulled in, my hands shaking. The lot was empty except for an old man sitting outside the diner. He watched me as I climbed out of my truck. "Long night?" he asked. "You could say that," I muttered, rubbing my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a laugh, but he didn't smile. "You saw him, didn't you?" he said, his voice serious. I froze. "What do you mean?" "The hitchhiker," he said. "You're not the first, won't be the last." I felt my blood turn to ice. "He was a trucker like you," the old man continued. "Died on this road years ago. Some say he's stuck here looking for a ride that will finally take him home." I didn't know what to say. My mind raced with questions, but I was too tired, too shaken to ask them. The old man said, standing up, "And if you see him again, don't stop." I nodded slowly and walked into the diner. But even as I sat down to eat, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. And when I looked out the window, I saw him standing by my truck, watching me. I sat in the diner, my hands wrapped around a hot cup of coffee, but I couldn't stop shaking. The old man's words echoed in my head. "You're not the first, won't be the last." I didn't believe in ghosts, I never had, but I knew what I saw. The hitchhiker had been there. He had spoken to me. And now, there he was again, standing by my truck, watching me. I forced myself to look away. Maybe if I ignored him, he would disappear. I focused on my food, but my appetite was gone. The truck stop was mostly empty, just a waitress behind the counter and the old man, who had gone back to his seat. I looked up again. The hitchhiker was gone. I let out a shaky breath. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe I had imagined but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. After a while, I paid my bill and headed back to my truck. The snow had slowed, but the cold was biting. I climbed into the cab, locked the doors, and started the engine. I needed to finish my route. As I pulled onto the highway, I turned on my CB radio, hoping to hear other truckers on the road. The familiar crackle of static filled the cab. Then a voice came through. "Breaker, breaker. Any drivers on Highway 46 tonight?" I picked up the mic. "Yeah, I'm out here. You?" There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, lower, almost hesitant. "You see him?" I felt my stomach twist. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The hitchhiker," the voice said. "Black coat, hood up. You seen him?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah. Picked him up a few miles back. He disappeared." The radio crackled again. "Listen to me, driver. If you see him again, don't stop, don't talk to him. Don't even look in your mirrors. Just keep driving." A chill ran down my spine. "Why?" I asked. "Because he's not looking for a ride," the voice said. "He's looking for a way in." Then the radio cut to static. I tried calling back, but there was no response. A way in? I didn't understand, but I didn't like it. I kept driving, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. I told myself I wouldn't stop again, not for anything. A few miles later, my headlights flickered, just for a second. Then, the temperature in the cab dropped. My breath came out in white clouds. The heater was on full blast, but it didn't matter. Something was wrong. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the passenger seat. My heart nearly stopped. Slowly, I turned my head. He was there, the hitchhiker, sitting in my truck, hands folded in his lap. His hood was down now, revealing a face so pale it looked almost blue. His eyes were black pits, sunken deep into his skull. His lips cracked into a grin. "You didn't stop," he said, his voice dry as dead leaves. I gasped and swerved, nearly sending my truck off the road. The tires screeched as I struggled to regain control. When I looked back at the passenger seat, It was empty. I was breathing so hard I thought my chest would burst. I wasn't going crazy. He had been there. Then my radio crackled back to life. "Driver," the voice from before said, "urgent now. Is he in the truck?" My hands were shaking as I grabbed the mic. I don't know. He was, but now. Get off the road. Now. I didn't need to be told twice. Up ahead I saw an old rest stop. I pulled in, my tires sliding slightly on the snow. I threw the truck into park and jumped out, my boots crunching on the ice. I looked around wildly, but there was nothing, just the wind and the distant hum of the highway. I stood there for a long time, my breath coming in gasps. Then, I climbed back into my cab, locked the doors, and turned on every light I had. I wasn't going anywhere until sunrise. I must have dozed off at some point because when I woke up, the sun was rising over the trees. The storm had passed, leaving the highway covered in a fresh layer of snow. For a moment, everything felt normal. Maybe it had all been a dream. Then I saw the note. Dashboard, written on an old yellowed piece of paper. 4 words scrawled in black ink. "Next time, don't stop." I stared at it, my stomach twisting in fear. Then, I turned the key in the ignition and got the hell out of there. I never drove that highway again. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone on the road, I check my mirrors, and every now and then, I swear, I see someone standing on the side of the highway, waiting. And the sky had already turned dark. The truck's headlights cut through the night, illuminating the endless stretch of highway ahead. My name's Jake, and I've been a long-haul trucker for more years than I care to count. I've driven through storms, across deserts, and along roads so remote that my truck seemed like the only thing alive on the planet. But nothing could prepare me for what happened that night. It started like any other shift. I was hauling a load of goods across the state, making my way through a stretch of highway that I'd driven hundreds of times before. The road was empty. The only sound in the cab was the hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the tires on the asphalt. I was tired, but I pushed on, knowing that I'd have to deliver the load by morning. There was no moon that night, just the black void of sky above me. The road stretched on, disappearing into the darkness. The radio crackled, and I turned it off, not in the mood for the noise. I was alone in the truck, as usual. My partner had called out sick, so I was on my own. I had passed a few small towns, nothing more than a few scattered lights in the distance. But as I drove, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the air felt thicker, heavier somehow. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to the tiredness. Maybe it was just the isolation getting to me, but then things started to happen. At first, it was just a strange feeling, like I wasn't really alone on the road. I thought it was just my imagination, the result of too many hours behind the wheel. But the longer I drove, the more real it became. It was as if something was following me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but all I saw was the empty road stretching behind me. A few miles later, I saw it, a light in the distance, flashing on and off. At first, I thought it was a car, maybe broken down on the side of the road, but as I got closer, I realized something was wrong. The light wasn't like any car headlight I'd ever seen. It flickered in a strange pattern, almost like it was trying to communicate something. I slowed down, my instincts telling me to be cautious. The light grew larger, and I could see that it was coming from a small, run-down building on the side of the highway. It was an old gas station, the kind that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The sign was barely visible, its paint peeling and faded. I pulled over, my curiosity getting the better of me. Maybe I could get a coffee or use the restroom, maybe even stretch my legs for a minute. But as soon as I stepped out of the truck, I felt it again, that strange unease. There was no sound, no crickets, no rustling of leaves, nothing. Just the cold, empty silence. I walked toward the building, my boots crunching on the gravel. The door to the gas station was slightly ajar, swinging in the wind. I pushed it open, and the creak of the hinges echoed in the stillness. The inside was dark, but there was a faint glow coming from the back. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. No answer. I took a few steps inside, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The place looked abandoned, with old dusty shelves filled with outdated products, a few cans of motor oil, bags of chips that had probably expired years ago. But then my eyes landed on the counter. There, standing behind it, was a man. He was tall, with a long coat that seemed out of place for the warm weather. His face was hidden in the shadows, and his eyes were the most unsettling part. They were wide, too wide, and they stared at me like he could see right through me. "Can I help you?" His voice was deep, almost too deep. I froze, not sure what to say. Something about the way he spoke made my skin crawl. I was just looking for a place to stop," I said, my voice shaky. "You know, coffee or something." The man didn't move, didn't even blink. It was like he was studying me, analyzing me like I was some sort of specimen. "You should leave," he said suddenly, his tone sharp. I didn't argue. Something told me I should listen. I turned quickly, heading for the door. But just as I reached for the handle, I heard a sound behind me, a soft scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. My heart racing, but there was nothing, just the empty, dust-filled air. I didn't wait any longer. I rushed out of the building, nearly tripping over my own feet in my haste. I didn't look back as I jumped into the truck and slammed the door shut. The engine roared to life, and I sped away, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. But as I drove off, I saw something else. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something standing at the gas station just outside the door. It was tall, too tall, and it was watching me. I didn't dare stop again that night. The rest of the drive was uneventful, but the unease lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone on the road. It was like something was out there, waiting, watching. The next morning, I passed the gas station again. It looked normal, just an old, run-down place like any other. But something told me that it wasn't, that it had changed overnight. Something was wrong there. Something that shouldn't be. I never stopped at that gas station again. But the stress didn't end there. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice more and more odd things happening on the road. The same eerie feeling, the same sense of being watched. Sometimes when I looked in the rearview mirror, I'd see a shadow flickering in the distance. Other times I'd hear strange noises, like whispers, coming from the back of the truck. And once I even saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's out there. But I can't shake the feeling that something is following me, something that I can't escape. And I'm starting to wonder if I ever really left that gas station behind. As days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Every time I hit the road, that nagging sense of being watched crept up on me again. It was as if the highway itself was alive, waiting for me to make a mistake. It wasn't just the strange occurrences anymore. It was the little things. The way my truck would start to shake, just slightly, as I drove past certain spots on the road. The eerie silence that would follow me after passing an old abandoned house or a worn-out diner. It was like I was surrounded by eyes that I couldn't see, but I could always feel them, lurking just beyond my reach. One night, I was on a particularly desolate stretch of highway. The kind of road that seems to go on forever, with nothing but barren land on either side. No lights, no houses, just the endless expanse of dark sky and pavement. I was halfway through my route when it happened again. I felt it, that cold, creeping sensation. A chill running down my spine that made every hair on my body stand up. Something was close, really close. I glanced around, my eyes scanning the night for anything unusual. The headlights barely cut through the darkness, and the road ahead was empty, just as it had been for miles. But there, in the distance, I saw a flicker of movement, a shadow darting across the road. Too fast to be human. I slammed on the brakes, the truck screeching to a halt. My heart was pounding, my breath coming out in short gasps. For a moment I just stared at the spot where I had seen the shadow, my mind racing. Was it an animal? A deer, maybe? Or something else? I didn't wait to find out. I floored the gas pedal and sped off again, the tires spinning on the pavement as I desperately tried to escape whatever was out there. My mind raced with thoughts of what could be lurking in the dark, something far worse than just... It wasn't long before I started hearing things, soft taps, like something was tapping on the side of the truck. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then the tapping grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from the back of the truck, near the cargo bay. I glanced at the mirrors, but all I could see was darkness. I couldn't tell if it was a trick of the lights or if something or someone was actually back there. My heart was in my throat as I reached for the radio, hoping to drown out the fear that was creeping into my chest. I needed to focus. I needed to keep my mind on the road. But as I reached for the dial, the tapping grew louder. It was unmistakable now, a steady rhythm that seemed to echo in the still night. I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to check. I pulled off the road, my headlights illuminating the empty stretch of highway. The wind howled outside, sending a shiver down my spine as I stepped out of the truck. The night air was cold, and the darkness felt thick, like something was pressing down on me. I walked around to the back of the truck, my footsteps crunching on the gravel. Every step I took felt like an eternity, and the silence was deafening. The tapping had stopped now, but the unease remained. It was as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I reached the cargo bay and slowly pulled open the latch, my hands trembling. The door creaked open, and I peered inside, empty. There was nothing there. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding and slammed the door shut. What the hell had been making that noise? I didn't know, but I sure as hell wasn't going to stick around to find out. I hurried back to the cab and got back on the road, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. Whatever was going on, I didn't want it to be part of it. I just needed to get this load delivered and move on. But that wasn't the end of it. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences grew more frequent. I'd hear the tapping again, but it wouldn't just happen on the road. It would follow me into the truck stop bathrooms, into the diner where I'd stop for a meal. Sometimes, when I'd stop to fuel up, I'd swear I saw someone watching me from the shadows. One night I was pulling into a truck stop, hoping to get a few hours of rest. I hadn't slept in days and my eyes were heavy. I parked my truck, locking the doors behind me, and climbed into the sleeper cab. I was just starting to drift off when I heard it. The tapping. It was coming from the roof of the truck. At first I thought it was just the wind again, but the sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate. It wasn't like anything I had heard before. The tapping grew louder, closer, until it felt like something was walking on top of the truck. I jumped out of bed and scrambled to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. My heart stopped when I saw it. A figure. It was tall, like the man I had seen at the gas station, but this one was different. Its body was shrouded in a cloak, and its face, if it even had one, was hidden in the shadows. Its long, thin arms stretched down toward the truck, its fingers tapping lightly on the roof. I froze, unable to move, unable to speak. I couldn't look away. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure was gone. The tapping stopped. The night returned to its eerie silence, but I couldn't shake the image of that figure from my mind. I didn't stay at that truck stop. I couldn't. I jumped back into my truck and sped away, the fear making my hands unsteady on the wheel. I didn't know what was happening to me, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't safe. For days I kept driving, never stopping for too long, never allowing myself to rest. The fear of what was following me, what was out there, consumed me. It was always just a little too close. A shadow in the corner of my eye, a tap on the truck when I wasn't looking. I tried to talk to other truckers, but they looked at me like I was crazy. "It's just the isolation getting to you," they'd say. "You're working too hard, that's all." But I knew the truth. It wasn't just my mind playing tricks on me. There was something out there, something old and ancient, something that didn't belong on the road. One night, I stopped at another truck stop, hoping to get a few hours of sleep before continuing my journey. Empty, just a few trucks parked along the edges. I climbed into the sleeper cab, locked the doors, and pulled the curtain closed. But as soon as I started to drift off, I heard it again, the tapping. This time it was louder, closer, almost like it was right above me. I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed the flashlight from the side of the bed and pushed open the door, stepping outside into the cold night air. I looked up, shining the flashlight across the roof of the truck. Nothing. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it, the presence that had been stalking me for so long. I turned slowly, my flashlight sweeping over the empty lot, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the truck stop, just beyond the light of the lamps. It was tall, too tall, its long arms hanging by its sides, its head tilted in a way that shouldn't be possible. I froze. It was the same thing that had followed me before, the shadowy figure that had haunted me. And this time, it wasn't just watching, it was moving toward me. I didn't know what to do. There was no escape. The figure moved slowly, its long limbs stretching unnaturally as it crept closer. My breath caught in my throat, and I backed away instinctively, my legs trembling beneath me. I couldn't take my eyes off it, even though every part of me screamed to run, to get in the truck and drive as fast as I could. But my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, the light from the truck stop lamps barely reaching the figure. It wasn't walking like a person, no. It was more like it was gliding, its feet barely touching the ground. The closer it got, the more I could feel the temperature drop, a coldness that seemed to seep into my bones. I thought I could hear whispers, soft and unintelligible, swirling around me in the air. My pulse raced, and I started to feel dizzy, like I was caught in a dream. My head spun, and my vision blurred. But through the haze, I could still see the figure coming toward me, its presence growing stronger with every passing second. It was almost at the edge of the truck stop when the trucker next to me came out of his cab, apparently hearing the strange silence that had settled over the place. His eyes locked onto the figure, and for a brief moment, I thought he was going to approach it, but the man's face went pale, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. "What the hell is that?" he gasped. His voice snapped me out of my daze, and I finally found the strength to move. I reached out for the door handle of my truck, but before I could even open it, the figure stopped. Its head tilted even further, as if examining us, and then it spoke in a voice that sounded like it came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Leave." The voice was low and rasping, like dry leaves scraping across concrete. The word echoed in my mind, reverberating through my skull. It was not just a warning, it was a command. Before I could process what was happening, the figure's eyes flashed with an unnatural glow, and a sharp gust of wind blasted through the parking lot, knocking me off balance. The trucker next to me stumbled, and we both struggled to hold our ground as the wind howled, making everything around us shake. The figure raised one arm, and I saw something in its hand, something long and twisted. It looked like a piece of the darkness itself, writhing and undulating, like a living shadow. It pointed at me and the trucker, and I felt my body lock up again, as if the very air around me had become solid. "Leave now," it repeated, its voice growing louder, more demanding. I didn't need to be told twice. I tore open the door to my truck and jumped inside, slamming it shut. My heart was pounding in my chest as I fumbled for the keys, nearly dropping them as I jammed them into the ignition. The truck roared to life, and I threw it into gear, speeding away from the truck stop without even glancing in the rearview mirror. I didn't dare look back. I couldn't. But as I drove, I could feel the presence, that presence, following me. I could almost hear its whispers, soft but persistent, clawing at my mind. The night was still, too still, and the road stretched out before me like a never-ending void. It felt like I was being pulled into it, like I was driving deeper into a place I wasn't meant to be. And then I saw it. The gas station, the same one from the beginning. I didn't recognize it at first, not until I was almost right on top of it. There was the faded sign, barely visible in the dim light of the truck's headlights. The same old gas pumps, the same rundown building, but something was different. The air around it felt thicker, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me. I tried to pass it, to keep driving, but my truck sputtered and groaned. It lost power. The engine stalled, and I could feel the weight of the world pushing down on me, pressing me into the seat as if the truck itself was being dragged into the gas station. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to get out. But I had no choice. The truck rolled to a stop in front of the gas station, and the headlights flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. The door to the gas station swung open. The man, the one from before, he stood there, waiting for me, his face still hidden in shadow. But now, I could see something else. Behind him, in the dim light, there were shapes, figures, all lined up like they were waiting for me. Tall, cloaked and thin, just like the one I had seen before. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, watching me, waiting. I knew what they were. I knew what this place was. It wasn't just a gas station. It was a trap. A place where they waited for those who wandered too close. A place where the highway itself was alive, drawing people in and feeding off their fear. The man's voice cut through the silence, his words like a cold wind. "You've been marked." The air grew colder, and I could feel the weight of their eyes pressing down on me. The shadows moved, slithering closer, stretching toward me like hands reaching for my soul. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body wouldn't respond. I couldn't move. I was trapped in the truck, held in place by something unseen. The engine sputtered again, and the lights went out, leaving me in total darkness. And then, I heard the whispers again. They were everywhere, inside my head, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The figures outside began to move, their limbs twisting in unnatural ways, growing longer and more twisted as they approached the truck. The man's voice was the only thing I could focus on, his words growing louder, more forceful. "You will never leave." I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg for mercy, but all I could do was watch as they closed in, their eyes glowing brighter, their bodies flickering in and out of the shadows. The world around me seemed to warp and distort, like the very fabric of reality was unraveling. I could feel myself being pulled away, dragged into the darkness with them. I knew that once I crossed that line, once I stepped into their world, there would be no coming back. And then, just as suddenly as it had all begun, everything went black. I'm not sure how long it's been since that night. It feels like years, but it also feels like it happened only yesterday. My truck is still here, parked by the side of the road. The gas station is gone, vanished into the night. But sometimes when I drive, I feel them watching me, waiting for the moment when I'll stop again. And when I do, they'll be ready. I've learned that some roads are meant to be avoided. Some highways lead to places where the living shouldn't tread. But no matter how far I drive, no matter how fast I go, I can never escape the shadow of the highway. It's always there, just behind me, waiting to claim another soul. The darkness stretched out before me as I drove, the road an endless ribbon leading nowhere. The truck hummed beneath me, but it felt like it was part of something bigger now, something far darker. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white, but even as I drove faster, the fear still clung to me. It was as if the highway itself had become part of me, and I could never escape. I kept looking in the rearview mirror, expecting to see the glowing eyes of those figures, the whispers in my mind still haunting me. But the road was empty. The gas station was gone. The shadows had swallowed it all. I had made it out, or so I thought. But I knew better now. The highway had taken something from me, not just my peace of mind, but a part of my soul. I could feel it, gnawing at me from the inside. It wasn't over. It would never be over. I tried to tell myself I'd be okay. I tried to convince myself that it was just a nightmare. But as I looked into the empty expanse of the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that the highway was still watching, still waiting. And somewhere, out there in the darkness, those figures were still waiting for the next trucker to pass by. The road never ends. The whispers never stop. And once you've driven too far, there's no turning back.